Hello, everyone. We are live. I am Sarah Andrews. I am one of the founders of OneFreePlanet, and I am here with Joyce Lynn Elder. She is a coach within OneFreePlanet, and of course has lots of amazing things that she does outside of OneFreePlanet that I'm sure she'll share with us. But we are here to talk today about what she has to share around this module that she's created called Take a Load Off, and about how really, like, if you want to be heard in the world and what you have to say, it has a lot to do with starting with your own beliefs and your ability to listen to other people before you get to the point of like trying to be heard, and how you speak to other people. So we're going to get into that. And before we do, and Joyce, I'll let you say hi too, I just want to make note that if you want to comment as we have this discussion, make sure that you click that link in the text for this Facebook Live. It's StreamYard.com/Facebook. We are using StreamYard to do this live stream. And if you want us to see your name on your comment so that we can say hi and reference you, then you need to give them permission. So just click that link there and just give them a quick permission, and then you'll be in our little chat box here. So hello, Joyce. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So just give us a quick introduction to you. Some people may know you, may not know you. What brought you to OneFreePlanet, and what is kind of your background behind this module?
I originally came to OneFreePlanet because I liked the idea of some of the values. I like being able to work with other people and other coaches as part of an organization, and being able to collaborate, and being able to also being able to get to know other coaches, and being able to recommend the work that they do, and being able to get to know them in order to do that. My background is pretty diverse. Specifically, right at the moment, outside of OneFreePlanet, I do some teaching for children in China, teaching them English as a foreign language. And I also have my own company, Conflict Options, LLC. And for that company, I do conflict and communication consulting and training. Right now, my focus is on working with police and attorneys. And I also am working toward being able to bring in some components on building resilience as well.
Wow. And you used to be an attorney, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you have some experience in that world. And also, I mean, like, we might as well just jump into this because I think it's a fascinating story that I definitely want to hear. You have some experience with some extreme circumstances, one of them being held hostage. And that has definitely influenced what you do with people now and around communication and everything. So do you want to just tell us that story?
When I was in association management, managing condominiums and homeowner associations, I had a person come in that was a homeowner in one of my associations. He didn't come in with an appointment. He just walked into the office, stormed the front desk, and came in hot pursuit of me. Fortunately, I was there, but he was going from door to door looking for me until he actually found me. And in his wake, the receptionist was chasing after him, yelling at him, which did not help his mood at all, I'm sure. And that alerted the office manager, and so she's in hot pursuit as well. So there's this whole train that, unbeknownst to me, is heading right for me. And I had my back to the door of the office that I was in because I was talking with other people that were further inside the office. And at one point, when I was talking, they looked around me and their jaws dropped and the color dropped down with their face along with it. And now I'm the type of person that is really curious. Yes, I noticed that they were doing it. Yes, I was in the middle of something, but if something is more interesting, by all means, what is it? So I'm turning around and looking, and there he was. He had a background in the military, and so we knew that he had a lot of training, and he also used a lot of weapons. He had self-reported that he did not leave the house without multiple weapons with him at all times.
Wow.
So there he was, less than an arm's length away from me, and he is announcing, I could absolutely kill you right now. Stone-faced cold. matter of fact and low threatening voice and everything. And there wasn't a person who was saying anything at this point. I've got a receptionist who's looking at me from behind him in total panic. The office manager is looking at me going, and you are going to handle this how exactly? And
like my heart felt like, obviously this is just a story, but I'm like, oh my God, what do you, anyway, go on.
So the other people in the office that I was standing in were just completely in shock, understandably. But at this point, when people talk about what to do in a threatening situation, they tell you to, and there are different variations of this, but basically what they recommend is being able to run. Well, the guy that I would run from was military, and he was standing in the doorway. I was on the second floor, so if I jumped out a window, I didn't necessarily think that would be
right.
an effective strategy. To the extent I could do it safely, he could do it better. So running wasn't going to work. And hiding was not going to work because he already had missed a lock on me. And I also wasn't going to really be able to fight him very effectively because I was coming at it from having had an injury at the time. And so there really were a lot of limitations. But the one thing that I knew that I could do was that as long as he was talking, I could listen. And I also I had enough training and enough information on different philosophies and ideas that I could use them and pretend, okay, I'm just going to have to treat him as if he were a coaching client. And so the first thing is that if I want to lead this conversation, then I need to be able to be more flexible than he is. And that means, number one, don't panic, because he's expecting that. Right. And so this whole conversation ensued where I'm expecting that all I'm doing is stalling for time, and that if I can extract myself and him from the others, they are going to call the police and leave. That neither one of those things happened. They didn't leave, they didn't call the police. So now I'm on point. I'm the only one working in an effort to resolve a situation where I was held hostage, not able to leave until he was satisfied. And in the end, obviously, it worked out okay. I was able to do it. But it worked out that a large part of what I did was what you would do as a coach. I listened like I had never listened before.
Well, yeah.
Fortunately, I'd been practicing this, and I'd had a lot of other extreme situations before that. So this wasn't a new thing. It wasn't like I was trying something I'd never done before. And then when I did start speaking up, it was from a lot of awareness about what his demands were, what he needed. His demands were what he said he wanted, but by listening, I was able to gather what it was that he actually needed. So while I legally could not give him what he was demanding, I could give him what he actually needed. And in the end, he ended up leaving with me escorting him out of the offices and out of the building even, just to make sure that nobody else, and just to make sure he didn't have any encounters with anyone else that were going to trigger him, because that was a big thing for him. He just triggered regularly when he was in an enclosed area with other people. If they surprised him, it would trigger him. Yeah. And so you had to really be able to be aware of him and put him first, while being able to stay. It's a little bit like chess, being able to see where they're moving and then anticipate where they want to go, but being able to know what you need to do at the same time. And it's this whole dance that you, in effect, have to lead without actually being able to communicate, here's where I need to go and here's where you need to go. And that was not the first time I had used all of the strategies in order to work through that, but it was the moment when I realized, oh, okay, number one, not everybody really has all these strategies. And if they do, they don't know how to use them. It was the first time that I really gathered that, oh, I actually do have a system. It's not just an accidental thing where I am just doing this ad hoc or impromptu conversation. Right. There is a method to it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm thinking like, that's obviously a very extreme situation, but like going back to what you said before, like we're all like in that kind of situation of like feeling like we're held hostage a lot of times. And whether it's like actual or not, like there are so many situations, and I feel like maybe even more and more so in our society, where there's tension that needs to be addressed, and like, you know, knowing this, or like really developing the skills to deal with that, because there's a lot to kind of consider in that moment to do it well. It's maybe never been more important, you know, than like right now. So, you're starting actually this module. Tell us about like where you're starting, because like I said, it's not about like, if you want to be heard, starting with the speaking part of it, but there's like underlying factors here. So what is like, where are you starting with this particular module? Take a load off.
There's a whole series, and I originally started with a different module on listening. And then I realized I only had one day where I was really talking about the things that hold us back from having good communication and from listening really well. Mm-hmm. And as we got further into that module, I started to realize, oh, there's actually more to it. I need to be allowing more time for conversation and exploration and resolution of those things that hold us back, and the things that are going to allow for us to solve those. So take a load off is an opportunity to, number one, take the weight off of your own shoulders. A lot of people tend not to want to have conversations if they think it's going to take somebody else off. That's not your responsibility. If somebody else chooses to be annoyed by something they do, they can choose to be annoyed by whatever you did or whatever anybody else did. And if they choose to, even if you don't have that conversation, they're going to end up having some assumptions because there's a communication gap. And the only way we can fill that is through assumptions. And most of the time, we're not aware of what those assumptions are. And so our best strategy for not having conflict, contrary to what a lot of us think, even when we know better, is we intuitively, we just don't want to have that conversation.
Right.
But when we start to recognize that there are some features and attributes of communication, we can actually let that weight fall off our shoulders. And also taking a load off of the entire conversation. Communication is collaborative, and we forget that. And the fact that it's collaborative means so much. It can resolve a lot of things up front, and it can also cause some interesting, some interesting moments as well. We tend to enter into a conversation wanting to control it. You know, we want to have our say. And we know, okay, I don't necessarily have to have my way, but we might be looking at our way. And even if we're just saying, I have to have my say, we're focused on our say. But we can't actually be heard we can't be heard well until we actually are able to meet the other person where they're at. And the only way we're going to do that is if we actually listen to them first.
That's so good. Actually, I mean, it's so funny that we're having this conversation. We're a little bit into it now. And I'm thinking like, you know, there are people who, at least one person I can see here in my little viewer that's listening to us. So thank you for being here. I want to acknowledge that we have people who are listening to us right now and kind of include you in this conversation too. I'd be curious to hear if you want to pop in the comments, you know, questions you might have about this topic or your experience, or, you know, like what are like the really hard parts about having these kinds of conversations for you, or listening, or, you know, whatever it is that takes to get through that with people. And I love what you just said about like it being a collaborative thing, because it can feel Oh, when you want to go into a conversation and like you got to make sure that it turns out a certain way, you know, and you're trying to, you know, like it's a lot of weight to carry into a conversation. And it makes it that much harder to have. And you know, if we were to view more of these conversations as like, okay, this is a project that we're working on together. Like we're going to address this issue together and get through it. It immediately feels so much lighter.
It does. It's empowering in a way when we think of it as collaborative, because of the fact that when we think it's all us, as soon as the other person does something that throws off our plan, that if we're not thinking of it collaboratively, that is going to muck up the whole plan, because we're going to come into it with, I've got to get this point and this point and this point across. Crap, you just dissed that point, so now I don't have that point. The whole thing is up in the air and now we're all screwed, right? But instead, when we come at it with, when I was practicing law, the best thing that I could ever do was know the other side's points and argument as well as they did. I had to brainstorm, okay, what's their theory? What points do they need to get in order to accomplish that? What is their evidence that they're going to need? And then being able to backtrack that and go, okay, so that thing they have to get in, I don't see a way that I can exclude it. So how can I make use of that? And when I was for example, when I had been hit in an automobile accident, my attorney had contacted me and said, you know, because of the prior accident, we're going to have problems. You're not going to be able to establish what injuries occurred because they've already excluded, you know, they've already closed out that prior case. They even did an independent medical exam on you to say you're done being treated, you know, and the IME came back and said, you're fine. And I was like, that's exactly what I'm going to use to establish their responsibility and what my injuries are. Because the fact that they're using that against us means that it's credible. So I don't have to establish credibility. And the fact that they are using it means that they actually believe it. So I don't have to make them believe it. All I have to be able to do is say, you said that, you know, you're using this, you clearly believe it. It's credible. And the fact that it's there only says that I was fine from that point. So anything that you're looking at in the terms of injuries now, it occurred from that point on. And so I spun it. I was able to find a way to use it. And in most cases, there are a lot of things that come up in any conversation that we can actually use. So a collaborative conversation takes us from those conversations we've all had where it's a yeah, but the person starts to say something and we are listening to reply and I say yeah, but. Collaboration and listening to understand takes us from a yeah, but to a yes, and conversation. And it changes the entire tone of the conversation. And it also means we can get better results from it.
Right. And I mean, and listening is key to that, right? Because like if you're doing the yeah, but thing, like you're not really listening most of the time because you already have the thing you're going to say next. But for a yes, and I mean, like even in like an improv context, you have to be totally present in the moment to know what you're going to add on, you know, like if you don't hear what was just said, then you can't and it, you know? So
exactly.
Yeah. Listening is key there.
And it means if you're in a yeah, but situation, you're actually weaker because you're inflexible. And if you're in a yeah, but type of strategy, you're also really not hearing what the other person says. And so you can't really respond to it. You can't use it for yourself and you can't defend against it being held against you either. So it really weakens your position when you're not in a collaborative dance with the other person as a partner. And in most cases, most of the conversations we have, we can either prevent or mitigate any kind of conflict that we have. Because when have you ever had a conversation where the other person doesn't care, they're completely dissing you by it's all about me. My opinion is the only one. My opinion is right. Yours, I don't even have to listen to yours because my opinion is right. And that is going to lead to more conflict. It is going to lead to more misunderstandings, and that is going to lead to more conflict as well. So there's no part of the yeah, but that actually is going to help us solve the problem or prevent or resolve any conflict.
Right. Yeah, Heather's here with us, one of our other coaches, because I like yes and. Thank you for being here, Heather, and commenting. What would you say, this is all kind of conceptual, what we're talking about, right? And it's like, it all makes sense and it all sounds good, but what is something that you can give to listeners who might find themselves in a tense conversation? Like, what's a practical thing that will help them listen better or help them to do the yes and? Because in the moment, it can just feel like, you know? So what do you actually do?
In a moment like that, we're especially for example, in the case where I was held hostage, the first thing that I can do in that case was take a breath in through the nose, nice and slow, and then breathing out through my mouth even slower. So we're looking for a ratio of 2 to 4, 2 in through the nose and 4 out through the mouth. I think I said that right.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is going to be able to help us to connect with our body. So we're not all up in our head. Mm-hmm. Because listening is actually not just about what you're hearing through your ears and what is being said. It's not about thinking ahead. There are a lot more aspects to listening as well. That's so taking a breath, taking a breath is, and continuing to do that throughout, is really one of the best things that you can do to help yourself stay grounded and being able to stay centered. Because when we're knocked off balance, as soon as somebody starts to do something that knocks us a little further, now we're going over. But if we can stay centered and grounded in some of the ideas that we bring to this, okay, communication is collaborative. I need to be breathing and staying grounded. I know what my points are and what I'm really looking for, and a number of other things that we go through in both Take a Load Off and in the next course in the whole series, which is listening between the words. In both of those, we're really looking at what types of things does it take in order to be centered? How can I be centered and grounded? And breathing is a really good way and very basic for us to be able to do that.
Wonderful. I love it. Yeah. And I just went to an event the other day myself where we were practicing listening from different parts of our body, which is kind of connected to what we're talking about here. You know, not only just connecting to your body in general, but I found that it was interesting to notice where I was listening from just as a starting point. And then intentionally moving into my heart and what is it like to listen from there? And it was a really interesting experience. And I noticed even feeling more things in my body when I was intentionally listening from there. So it is so much more than just, what's coming in your ears.
Oh, yeah. And when you actually start to take words, Albert Mehrabian did a study back in the 70s, and it's actually been misconstrued and misinterpreted by a lot of people. You may have heard that communication is 7% words, 35% tone, and 55% nonverbal. What he actually said and found was that is true in the cases where we're asking about attitudes such as likes and dislikes, and in those cases where where there is some disagreement in the nonverbal and the verbal or nonverbal and the words that are being used and the tone. When those two things happen, then that is true. But it still points to the fact that there sort of is a hierarchy that we're more inclined to believe. So yes, there is a lot to be said for it. And with each piece that we are filling in is giving us that much more of the picture. If we go into a conversation with black and white, we're going to miss all the nuances that are going to make it come alive and give us more opportunities. If we go into a conversation just based on what they say, we're going to miss the things that they are not saying, and we're not going to be able to hear what happens in between their words. We're going to miss, and since when does something that a person say actually really reflect what they actually mean? Because we all know, we've all had that experience where I just said that wasn't really, I didn't say what I actually meant. And so sometimes we have to be able to back up and restate things. And so there is a lot to be said there. We are bombarded with information in every second. The book by, I sometimes wish I picked a different topic where, John Smith wrote this book or something, but no, I get Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
It's always fun to say that guy's name.
I had to practice. That was a whole, I need a class just in how to pronounce his name. And so he wrote a book called Flow. And in that, the specific number, I'm not remembering at the moment, but it was millions of pieces of data and bits of information that is hitting us in every second. But our brains can't process that quickly. Instead of millions of bits of information, we might be able to process 136 bits of those millions. And so part of the reason that we have to remember that communication is collaborative is to be able to expand our awareness so that, we're looking at this 136 bits. Now what happens if we look at this 136 bits and this 136 bits? And soon we're opening and expanding our whole life and views on the world, because we're able to experience other people's views of the same situation.
Yeah, and I think this is circling back to, we've kind of gotten off into the listening aspect, which is more the topic of your next module. But for this one, we're really looking at like, what beliefs are you coming into a situation with that's like kind of curating that little slice of, information that you're really bringing into your awareness, right? Can you talk about like what limiting or the limiting beliefs that you commonly come into contact with that are like really kind of creating a block for people, or like skewing their ability to communicate and listen to other people? Are there like some common things?
One of them is a lot of people do not want to have conversations because it's going to make the other person mad. Well, the fact that you don't have that conversation doesn't mean they're not going to be mad. It just means you're not talking about it, and therefore you don't have the opportunity to be heard. So now you may be being judged on the topic, on something that wasn't even true in the first place. We also tend to forget that we come into it with the idea that I have to do everything. If I don't do this exactly correctly, then the whole conversation is going to be blown. I have to say exactly what I mean. I have to do everything perfectly. No, it's collaborative. The other person is going to do things, and guess what? They are not out to get you. One of the biggest attitudes that we have when we come into a conflict, it's mostly because we're face to face with the other person. We think we're fighting with that other person, right? We're making it about that other person, their identity, their beliefs, something about them. But really, that whole conversation isn't about that person at all. They are as much a party to and a partner with you on the situation right here. So when I was in that hostage situation, I had to remember that, okay, he's not really mad at me. This has nothing to do with me.
Right.
I have no part in this other than to kind of go, okay, let's focus on this. Okay, so you're not happy with this. Let's focus on this, and being able to continually bring the focus back to what really is the issue at hand, and being able to establish what is the problem exactly. Because when we can determine what exactly is the problem, we can also find what the problem is not. And that's where the solutions are going to be for us.
Yeah. This is so good. Because I'm just thinking about, like, if you are able to, so often the habit is like, oh, I did something wrong, I'm going to feel ashamed. And then when you're coming from that place, you like, it's hard to find solutions because you're so kind of caught up in all of that stuff. So if you can just, whatever it takes, forgive yourself, just understand that it's not you necessarily, and also accept that you have an opportunity to be compassionate in the situation and help out and collaborate to come to a resolution. I think that's the balance that we really want, because it's also not about like, well, that's not my fault, I'm out of here, I mean, not necessarily, maybe sometimes it's useful, but I think what is being called for in the world right now is not necessarily like, oh, it's all my responsibility and like I'm such a bad person. Like, that's not helpful. But that in between place of, I'm not going to take that on, and I'm also going to help here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We go into conversation thinking, I have to control this, it's all me. And therefore, when something else happens, when the other person escalates or gets angry, they start to raise their volume, they start to increase their speed, their expressions become more intense, their gestures get bigger and faster. Whatever it is, we start to get nervous because, oh no, I don't know what to say to them. Mm-hmm. What if it's not about you saying anything? What if it's not about you at all? And instead, all you need to do is slow down and manage yourself. And because that's really what control is. We don't have control over the whole situation or the other person. We can only control ourselves. But we go into a lot of conversations sometimes without having set up our intentions, without having done anything ahead of time. And that's where we get into trouble, is we start to do things automatically and by emotion. Mm-hmm. And we forget that we can't expect the other person to have more control of themselves than we have over ourselves. And so if the other person is ramping up, that's okay to let them get excited, because in reality, it's easier. When I mediate, it is a lot easier for me to have someone come in hot and have me help them to tone down and come down to a more productive level than when they come in completely apathetic. And then I end up having to probe, and then that ends up stirring the pot, because when I have to do that, then invariably the person ends up escalating beyond where you actually want them to be. So allowing for the fact that sometimes the best form of control is allowing for the fact that it's not, control isn't what we think. It's just about being okay with the situation and saying, okay, if you need to, I've been there, I've been hot. Yeah. I haven't always said the thing perfectly. And you know what? Yeah, I'm sure that I have hurt people with the things that I've said, and it wasn't really about them at all. It was just that I had to have some way of venting. We've all done that. We all wanted to be in a case where we were comfortable. But if we take the easy way out now and don't stay in those conversations and have those, then it's going to be a bigger deal later. It's sort of like when I went through coach training, they were talking about, you can learn now when it's a feather. And if you ignore when it's a feather, then you're going to get the brick. And this lesson that you keep ignoring soon is going to no longer be a brick. Now it's going to be a truck that is heading straight for you. And if you happen to ignore it then, because you're really stubborn and you really, really, really don't want to deal with it, you're going to get the locomotive or the airplane or whatever it is that is coming right for you. Eventually, sooner or later, you're going to have to learn this. So the sooner, in the long run, it's much more comfortable to have the conversation coming at it from a place where you are centered. And that's really what Take a Load Off is about, is letting go of some of those beliefs that you might have had, and also being able to kind of take a load off of yourself by allowing the other person to have theirs, and taking a load off of them by being able to be a part of it. When I was an association manager, we we occasionally had a board that was made up of 5. But as far as the functionality of the board was concerned, it was only one person because the board president had an idea and his way or the highway. And the other board members were acquiescing. And I would go in and have to explain to the other board members, do you understand that you're required to have 5 members? And that's not so that just for the sake of a quorum. For a quorum, yeah, only 3 of you need to show up. But as far as the reasons that you started coming in because you wanted to have a say in how things go with your association. You wanted to be able to have a voice. You wanted to help. But as it is right now, you are redundant until and unless you speak up. It's fine to go along with what the president wants, he or she, what they want, as long as you agree. And as soon as you start to have questions or doubts or other opinions, you need to be able to bring them up. Acknowledge where he's at, but bring your own up as well.
Right. Yeah. Then it truly, it brings so much more richness to anything when everybody's, sharing what they believe and, their perspective. Everybody can learn from each other. I just want to acknowledge J.A. Webb. I'm not sure what your real name is, but it says, hi, Sarah and Joyce. So thank you for joining. And let's just wrap this up by sharing the details about what you're offering through OneFreePlanet, this module, Take a Load Off. Tell a little bit about what people do, what it looks like, anything that people might want to know to go to the next step with you.
Take a Load Off is the first in a series on communication. It's really geared toward being able to communicate through not just conflict, but also crisis. And if you can communicate through those, then you're going to be able to communicate through the everyday conversations that are a little bit odd as well. So Take a Load Off is going to be geared towards setting yourself up, taking out some of those ideas that might have been holding you back in the past, and being able to replace them with more empowering ideas. And the next one, the sequel to that, is Listen Between the Words. And that's where we're getting into a little bit more of the detail with what exactly is listening and what are the benefits to it and what are the responsibilities of it and how exactly do we do this? What are the mechanics of it? Mm-hmm. And then we move into, okay, I've listened, now what do I do? That is the next module after that. Great.
Awesome. And then what does it look like? I mean, so this is a 5-day experience, and what do you, how do you meet, and what, some details about what it looks like to work with you.
All of the sprints are run on Skype. It's 1 hour per day for these ones are 5 days. And it's at the same day each day of the week. So Take a Load Off. The next sprint is offered on starting September 9th at 3:30 in the afternoon Pacific time. Mm-hmm. And for an hour, we're going to be having a conversation and we're asking questions, also running some fun exercises to be able to make the points and being able to draw them home. Because it's one thing for me or you to say something, it's another thing entirely to actually experience it and be able to see it. And then there are some, Take a Load Off has some short home play to be doing in between as well, just to set us up for the next conversation, because that hour goes by pretty quickly. And especially if we have more people, it's generally 3 to 7 people. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that you start to hold a sprint on listening, and soon everybody wants to talk and be heard. So for the sake of economy of time, there's just a little bit of setup so that you're not taking some time to think about, okay, what do I want to cover? And then going into the exercise from there.
Okay, great. So 5 days, you're meeting every day for an hour. There's a Facebook group as well where people can gather, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's $88 for the 5 days?
Yes.
Okay, great. And
Yeah.
I would say, so to let people know who aren't familiar with OneFreePlanet, we're a network with an affiliate aspect. So everybody's connected within our network. So if you are interested in getting a link to find out more about Joyce's module, just comment. We look at these comments and definitely want to be part of the conversation with you. So thank you so much, Joyce. This is great. It really gave me a lot of things to kind of consider and think about and even practice as I move forward in conversations with people.
Yeah, communication is such a huge topic, and I get pretty excited and geek out on it, as you might have noticed.
For good reason. You have so much experience to back it up. And I mean, if you're just catching the end of this, go back to the beginning of this video where she tells her hostage story, because it's pretty powerful. It's clear that you are doing the work that you're meant to be doing and sharing with other people. So thank you. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah. Well, everybody enjoy your day, and we hope to hear from you soon. And Joyce, thanks so much. We'll talk to you soon as well.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.